Hi, today we're going to learn everything about drag and drop, how to make drag and drop applications in Wized, how to take the drag and drop events and then send them to Zano, and then how to reflect those drag and drop changes in Zano as updates on our records in our database. So this is super exciting stuff because we're going to build visual interface configurators inside of Wized. With this principle in mind, you can build Zapier in Wized, you can build FastGen in Wized, you can build node-based editors using, based on a drag and drop principle, which is pretty cool. You can build email builders in Wized now with the principle of understanding how drag and drop works. So let's get started with the setup. This is great for beginners, but also great for intermediates because drag and drop used to be a rather complex topic in Wized. But thanks to the updates that the fantastic WIS team made, it is more easier and more faster and more secure than ever. So let's get right started. So we want to start with an empty Webflow project. So I just have my body in here, and inside the body, I'm going to add a section. Now I'm going to need to give the section a name. So I'm going to call the section, you guessed it, section. I forgot the T, section, just like that. And I need to give it a minimum height of 100 VH, so it covers the whole screen. Important is you want to have a minimum height of 100 VH, so if it is 105, it will not be cut off. So this is it's a minimum height. So we got that in place, and now I just want to give like every side a radius of like 2 rem, like a padding. So I type in 2 rem on the top one, I'm going to click Shift Return, and it applies to all the sides. Thank you so much to whoever in the comments told me you're using this in Webflow wrong. I did. And now in here, I want to add like a div block. So I'm going to take the section, I'm going to do flex going down. I'm going to take the div block, and let's call this app shell, for example. I'm going to make the sizing full height. And now I can style it a little bit. So let's actually add like a nice dark mode in here. So let's go to backgrounds. Okay, that looks good. And let's take this one. Make it a little bit lighter. Perfect. And let's add like a very light border radius. Okay, looks very nice. Okay, perfect. And now let's add 1 rem on all sides. Perfect, maybe even 1.5 rem. Okay, that looks perfect. Beautiful. So we got that working. And now I want to have those items divided in like 2 sections so I can move them from, oh, I went back by mistake. So I can move them from one side to the other. So the idea is for our drag and drop example today, we want to have like 2 sides. Let's say one is in progress and one is completed. And I can drag an item from in progress to completed and vice versa. So this is our idea. So let's do this. Let's add like a div block in here. Perfect. And let's call this category. Just like that. And let's make the height 100%. Oh, that will not work. So we're going to take the app shell. We're going to make it flex down. I'm going to make this full width, and I'm going to have this width of 50%. I'm going to copy this. And oops, let's see. They're now under each other. I would like to have them next to each other though. So I got to do it like this. And here we go. So flexbox side. And now we have those next to each other. Now I want to do like 1.5 rem space between them. Perfect. And let's give this like a subtle color to stand out a little bit. Perfect. Let's make the corners rounded. Let's add like a little put a little highlight on there, and that looks good. Perfect. So now I'm just going to add like 2 rem, 2 rem, 2 rem on all sides, 2 rem. Perfect. So I have some space in here. And now we want to add the first item. We're going to render 2 lists, one for completed and one for in progress, one for completed. So let's call this item. And, you know, let's add like a task name in here. Okay? Let's add the heading in here. And I want to actually go to the body, since we're using a dark theme, and adjust this to be white. Perfect. And since we're on it, let's change it actually also to system UI, just like that. So now I can take the heading, I can make it a little bit thinner, and I can click on here and I can make it like 3. And now I have my task in here. And now I don't want this, I don't want the top or the lower margin. So let's remove this, let's take the item, let's add like 1.5 rem around all sides. Oh, that's too much. Let's do 1 rem around all sides. Perfect. And let's actually make this also a little bit stand out again. Maybe let's give it like a little bit more darkish touch. That looks good. And let's give it rounded corners. And let's give it like a little, oh, that looks nice. Perfect. Okay, it's a little bit too intense, the border though. Let's see. Oh yeah, that's it. That's it. And now what I like to do, since I'm going to render dynamic content and I don't want to have content flashing, I'm just not going to serve any template text. Normally in WIS people would do like a template text, but then you're just having template text content flash. I'm just going to click Shift, space, 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 space. Oh, a few spaces. Remove the dot. And now I can see my heading, but it will not be set as text. So this will make the whole, the whole rendering a little bit nicer. So I have my task in here. I have my task item in here. And this will be rendering the list in here for all completed tasks. Actually, why don't we just add like a heading on here so we know those are completed tasks. So let's call this completed. And let's add like a little party symbol. Actually, it makes maybe more sense to put the completed on the right hand side and the in progress on the left hand side. And let's do working on it. Okay, and let's add an emoji with like a little sweat going down. That looks fun. Okay, so let's take the list item and let's put it under this heading on both sides because they both need to render lists. And let's take this heading here and, let's remove the gaps and, heading 2. Let's take the class for heading 2 and apply it on here so the style updates. And now let's add like a div block to add a little spacer under here. Let's take this div block. Let's call this spacer. And start the height by 2 rem. And now we can copy the spacer and move it over here. And now we have some space. Look at that. Beautiful. Now a cool thing with the spacer is you can also do like a height of 1 rem and a margin of 1 rem. And then you can just, like on the top border, you can add like a line with a very subtle fade to give it like a nice separation divider layout, kind of like. And then since we have the divider layout, it will look better if we do like 1.5 rem and make the height 1.5 rem, and then it will just look like a little bit cleaner, I think. It looks nice so far. So we have the text to render it, and we have the lists. So that is cool. So what we need to do is we now need to add Wized attributes on everything. This list will be rendered as the working on it list. So let's add a Wized attribute on the list item so that in Wized we can render a list for those list items. So let's add an attribute. We need to give it the name of Wized so Wized can pick it up. and let's do work in progress list item. Perfect. And then for the done list item, I'm going to give it a Wized attribute of done list item. They need to have both two separate attributes because those are two separate lists being rendered. And then I'm going to take the heading here, and I'm going to give it a Wized attribute of work in progress list item text. And then I'm going to go to the completed one, and I'm going to give it the Wized attribute, so Wized can pick it up as done list item text, just like that. So we have those. Now we can render the lists in Wized. So that looks good. And what we could actually do later, we'll do that later on to make like the nice fade-in animation stuff. We don't need to worry about that right now. But yeah, here we go. We got that done. Oh, actually, what we don't want to do, if we want to have fade-ins, we wanted to render the list in a div block because, and here's like a little downside of Wized that I hope that if they have time, fix it. The downside that Wized has is if you render those items as list items, you cannot use CSS to make them fade in. You need to use mutation observer in JavaScript, which is a lot of code for a little thing. So I really hope that at some point Wized figures out how to fix that. But until now, what we need to do is, okay, maybe let's just keep this auto. I want to wrap the list being rendered based on this list template item in a div block. And I want to call this like fade in block, for example. So when I want to have the list items fade in, I need to wrap them in a div block that will have the Wized attribute to make all the child elements in it fade in. I cannot apply the fade in transition on the list item because it is manipulated by Wized, and therefore the animations will not fully work. So let's have like this fade in block, and let's give it the Wized attribute of fade in block, for example. And I can actually copy this fade in block and put it down here, and just like take the fade in block and take the item, which those are different items, and put the item in the fade in block. Here we go, and they can both have the same attributes. So we are ready now to connect this to Wized, and then to build the database part, and then to start writing some JavaScript in Wized to make the whole thing work. So let's copy this, and I have the strong assumption that maybe this video may be a little bit glitchier too, because I have like 15,000 iOS files on my computer, which my MacBook Air absolutely cannot handle. So excuse me if my lips are not in sync with what I'm saying. Okay, so let's go to site settings, and let's go to custom code, and in the header of the page we want to add the Wized embed. Now, if Webflow is saying you got to pay for this, you can also add this as a custom embed, like as a custom code embed in the Webflow canvas itself. That should normally work. Let's hope it does. So it is loading. Perfect. And now on Wized, I'm going to go back to Wized. I'm just keeping the name as it is. I'm going to click on Create Project. So now once the project is created, I'm ready to rock in Wized, and I can render my lists in here. I can do all that exciting stuff. So we got the outline working now. Now let's go to Zano and let's build the database for our tasks. So let's go to Add Table. Let's call it Drag Drop Tasks, and let's make them SUUID, and we don't need to create CRUD endpoints. So let's create this table, and very simple. Let's add task. Let's add a name field for task so we can write the task in here, and let's add an enum, and let's call this type, and let's add two different values, right? So let's add done and to do, meaning needs to be done. Let's save this, and let's add some tasks in here. let's add buy milk from Walmart. Just like that, buy milk from Walmart, and that needs to be to do. And then make Wized video, and that is done. And now let's add delete your iOS files. Needs to be done. Oh, not to do, needs to be done because my computer is extremely slow. It's a downside of building a tool that makes iOS apps. You're going to have a lot of iOS apps on your computer for testing. Oh, let's actually tell Grammarly to please leave. Okay, perfect. So let's add a new thing, another thing. Let's do buy iPhone. Okay, and let's do to do. Even though I don't need an iPhone, I'm good with mine from 4 years ago. And let's do buy MacBook. That is to do. And let's do self-host Wized. Happy to say that is done. Okay, I think that is enough dummy data. So we have the data in here. Let's duplicate this tab real quick. And what we want to do is we want to create an API. Oh, and what I forgot is we also need to add attributes on those items in here because they are the drop zones. So, excuse me for forgetting that. Let's add a custom attribute of Wized in here, and let's call this work in progress drop zone. Just like that. And let's go to this one and let's call this Wized, so Wized can pick it up. Done. Drop zone. And excuse me for forgetting that. So that should work. And let's continue with our API. So let's go to add API group in Zano, and let's call this drag drop tasks. And we want to turn Swagger off. That is all you need to do, and your endpoints are protected. At least are more secure than they usually are. And let's add an API endpoint. Let's add a custom endpoint. We will do a get, and we will call this render tasks, for example. Let's save this. And we don't need any input, but we want to add to the function stack query all records. And let's look for drag drop tasks. Perfect. Now we want to do a custom query, and we want to do this 2 times. I'm going to tell you why. First, I only want to get all the tasks here that are to do. So let's go to custom query on the first one, add conditional. I want to look for the type enum, and I want this to be, let's say, to do, right? And then I'm going to go to output, and I'm going to call this to do tasks. Let's save this. Let's skip this. Perfect. So I have to do tasks. And now I want to go to the second query, a custom query. I want to go to type, and I want this one only to be done, right? So I have 2 variables. I go to output, and I call this done tasks. So the magic happening here, and let's skip this. If I add a stop and debug, my absolute favorite feature in Zano, if you don't know what you're doing, just like me, if you're going to run this, you will see that I'm only getting all my to-do tasks. And if I put the stop and debug under the done tasks, just like that, I'm only going to get all the ones that are done. So I have 2 separate types of data queried from my database. And I want to go to return here, and I want to take the to-do tasks and return them as to-do, right? Save. And I want to add another return in here. and I want to go to my done tasks and return them as done. So as you can see, I'm returning done and to do. Let's save this. So now when I run this whole thing, I'm going to get an object containing an array of to do, a list of to do tasks like this, and a list of done tasks like this. And I can use dot to do then in WIS to render all my to do tasks, and dot done in WIS then to render all my done tasks. So this is all we need to do in Zano for rendering the lists. Now we got to build an endpoint to update that, but we're going to build the structure for that after we figured out how to maneuver with the drag and drop. So let's go back and let's copy the base URL for this group. Let's go to Wized and let's go to the app section. This is the random icon right on the top here. Let's click on the plus and let's call this Zano tasks. Just like that. Let's go to app. Zano will be a REST API because it uses REST API technology. And let's write return. You always have to write return. Quotes, because we're returning a string, meaning blank text. And let's paste our endpoint group URL in here. This is all we need to do. Now, oh, by the way, there's like some space missing here. And let's add a plus. And let's call this get tasks. Perfect. So let's go to Zano and let's write return. And now we want to add like our endpoint specific endpoint. So this will be this extension, right? And then I'm going to add quotes and do this in here because since I'm already referencing to the URL I added in the app, Wized is just concatenating, merging the part added on top of here and the part I add in here into one. I don't really know why they do it, but they seem to do it to make it easier to work with multiple endpoints without having to enter the whole URLs. They give you like a more modular system, which, you know, just don't add the whole URL in here. Just only add the path and add like the group, the first part in here. Perfect. So let's do this, and let's do the method is get, because as you can see in Zano, it says get right here. Perfect. And I don't need to pass on any parameters, so let's run this. And new cool thing, I can see those things in the log panel, which the log panel is something that is cool, but I don't think that it will replace console log for debugging, at least not right now in the stages where I've seen it is in. But, you know, because I think you can only see things that are happening within the Wized runtime and not like everything that's happening on the window. But please correct me if I'm wrong. So, especially when you work with SDKs, you work with a window. But yeah, we got the data in here and we can now render the list from here. We have .todo and .done. So let's actually start rendering the list since we have this information. So actually, you know what? Let's even go one step back because right now I'm not getting any data when the page loads. So before that, I just want to add an action saying call tasks on page load, just like that. So I'm going to go to event, and we want this to trigger when the page starts loading, and I want to do perform request get tasks. Now when I go back to the data store and I load the page, you see the tasks are being automatically called. So now let's go to the work in progress list item and let's render the list. So let's go in here and let's go to render list, and this is work in progress. So let's first of all write return and let's go to our data in here and let's see what we can do with it. So let's go in here and we have to do, right? Now here I have all my list with all the tasks to do. So I need to add an iterator. So I click on the plus and let's call this iterator. And I want to start with return 0. The iterator will help us render the list because we need to like count the items in order to render the list accordingly. So now we have rendered the list. Nice. And oh, we forgot to add like a little margin. So in the fade in block that will contain those list items, I just want to do flex going down, and I want to add like a gap of 1 rem, for example. So now when I publish this and WIS tries to re-render it, it will work within the configurations of the Webflow template. As you can see, we have our spacing here. So now let's go into the text item in here, and let's go to set text, return, and now I just want to take the part of this item that will have the text. This will be .task, and now I have my 0 in here, which I want to replace with exactly the iterator that is applied on the render list action right here. And therefore, when I reload this now, I will always get the dynamic text for the task because it uses the iterator that is being used to render the list, so I can reference back 1 needs to be 1, 2 needs to be 2, and so on. It will map it. So we got that working. That seems to work pretty good. Let's do the same thing for the other side. So let's go to our done tasks list. Let's go to render list. Let's write return. Let's go to .done, the first .done that contains like all this gibberish data here on the side. This is the one you want to take. This contains the whole list. We can actually apply the same iterator on there because they both have the same pattern as the list. You would need to use a different iterator if you render a list within a list, just so that you know. And then we got that. Let's reload the page. We see those are being rendered. Now let's go to the task item. Let's go to set text, plain text, return, and let's go to the done tasks. Let's pick the task, and let's replace the number with our iterator that is also related to that list. So now we have 2 lists rendered. Now we want to make those items draggable. So let's go on this item here, on the item that will be rendering the list, and let's add the attribute draggable true. Just like that, we have draggable true. We want to add that on both. So I'm going to add draggable true, just like that. And now I want to click on publish. And let's publish the selected domains. And now we should be able to drag those around. Let's see. Here we go. Now they're not snapping in place, but they are now already draggable. Isn't that cool? So check this out. They are draggable now. We can drag them around on the screen. So what we want to do now is we want to listen for drag and drop events. So this will be fun. So the first part is whenever I drag or start dragging any of those items, right, I want to log it in a variable, which is pretty cool. So let's start with the work in progress ones. So let's call this variable here, and let's call this dragged item data. A variable will help us to store data temporarily. So I'm going to return, and I mean, we can just do this as a string. In some instances, yeah, let's just do this as a string. You could do this also as a whole object if you want to pass on more data, but I'm not going to make myself the work to do that because we just have like text, so we can just move text from here to there and so on. So let's have it like this. We just need to create an empty variable because then we can set this. So for this one, I want to add an action where on event drag start, I'm going to set the variable for dragged item data to return, and here comes the cool thing, the text of the current dragged item, just like that. And I want to add the iterator so it gets a dynamic value from it. So now if I drag buy milk from Walmart, it will say buy milk from Walmart here. And if I drag delete your iOS files, it will say delete your iOS files. And if I drag by iPhone, it will say by iPhone. And if I drag by MacBook, it will say by MacBook. So this is pretty cool. So we got that working by simply just looking for the drag start event, which is pretty cool. So what we want to do now is we now want to do the same thing for the other lists so they can work, interchangeably. So I'm just going to add another sub action here. I'm going to go to onEvent, drag start. I'm going to go to set variable. I'll be taking my dragged item data. I'm going to write return, and I'm going to go to my done, to the task, and I'm going to replace the number with the iterator so we get the dynamic value of the one that the event is happening on. So now, if I drag make Wized video, it will say make Wized video. If I drag self-host Wized, it will say self-host Wized. If I drag buy milk from Walmart, it will, say buy milk from Walmart. So those work interchangeably, which is what we want. We want to track the data of them. And then when I drop it on here, it will transfer that data into here and then do the API call. So this is what we want to do. And let's see, how it goes from here. So now on drop event, we want to do a little bit of a fake kind of like. So on drop event, or actually, do we want to make it that complicated where we manipulate the HTML data in this video because it's for beginners? No. On drop event, we're going to let's do it like this. On drop event, we're just going to make an API call and wait till it updates the list. That's it. So let's go to our work in progress drop zone, and let's go on event drop. So now we need to have we would need to perform a request to take this name and to, remove it from the item it is on. And actually, the more I think about it, the more I want to do this actually as an object. So let's actually update this variable to an empty object. Here you go, because I want to pass on the UUID so I can query it. So let's actually update both of those. Let's do return, and let's copy this. This is good. This is good. But let's copy this and create an object here, just like that. And let's add this in the object. And here we go. So let's call this in the object. Let's do task. And then I have my task ID. And I want to add a comma. And or a colon. Oh no, whatever that thing is called. And I want to have task ID. Yeah. So I want to copy this line. And I want to have ID containing the ID. So let's see if that works. Oh, we got a double of those. That does not work. Let's see why. Oh, I have double task. That looks off. Okay. Let's see. There's probably something wrong on my syntax here. So let's just ask ChatGPT why this is not working, because I'm not an expert. So let's go to ChatGPT. And let's say, why is this object not working? Let's see. It contains a few errors, of course. I had to do comma. Interesting. Oh yeah, it was a comma. So let's do a actually, does it fix it if I do it as a comma now? Oh, come on. It was just the comma. Okay. Here we go. So it was just the comma. And I wanted to add the comma at the beginning. You saw that. So it was just the comma. Okay, here we go. So we got the comma. ChatGPT, thank you so much. So I have task and ID. So I want to, therefore I pass on more data. So let's do the similar thing now with the other list item. So I get the ID, so it makes it easier for me to query it. And this will be, we want to update this one to be done, so it takes it from the other list. Oops. Okay, let's do done, done, and here we go. We got that one. So let's see if that works. Now, when I drag this, I'm going to get the task ID, and it will update. Perfect. And I will have the task ID included in here, which will be very important because we will use this task ID to get the specific record, to remove it, and to then create a new record on the other instance. So far so good. Let's create a new endpoint in Zano, and let's actually start out with an endpoint that just receives data, and based on how we receive the data, we're going to make the logic work in Zano. So let's go to custom endpoint. This will be a post because we're sending data, and let's call this update. Just like that. Let's save this. Let's copy the update path. Just like that. Let's reload, and now we want to add a new request called update, and this will work with our URL endpoint. Let's return. Let's add the path for update. Now I'm going to add post, and I'm going to add in the body. If I do a post, I want to add this data in the body. Let's add ID. Let's do return, and let's, for now, let's just drag an item so we get some data here. I want to return .data .id, so I'm getting the ID of the current dragged item, and I want to do task, and I'm going to write return, and I'm going to take the data.task, so I'm taking the task of it, like the name. Now, when I run this, I will be sending this data to the endpoint. So if I go to my request history and wait a little bit, I should be seeing the data pop in any time. Let's see, sometimes it takes a little bit with Zano, so we just want to be, actually, let's just add inputs. We should still receive the data though, as you can see here, and we got the input, but to make our life easier, let's add like the inputs in Zano. So let's add a text field for the ID. Even though it is a UUID, you don't want to use the UUID field here, because the UUID is a specific data type, a specific integer-based data type, which will mess up everything. And then we have the task in here. So now by naming those inputs here, they will be, it will make it easier for us to work with them. So we receive the task ID and the task. So what we want to do right now is when we receive a task ID, we want to update this task, right? So let's figure that out, where we want to update it to. And actually what we could also do is we may want to do, let's see how we do it, because if we apply it on here, I would like to figure out that it was dropped on, okay, I have an idea. Okay, so when it was dropped on working on it, I would like it to update it to working on it. But what if I drag this item here and then move it back here? Like there is no really like a drop event happening then. So what we want to do is we want to basically have two separate requests for both of those buckets. Now we could do it simpler. We could add more HTML events, but that will make it more complicated. So actually, let's update this. Let's do update work in progress, right? Like update work in progress bucket, for example. Here we go. Let's save this, and let's update the endpoint URL we're calling because we changed the name. So let's go to, let's also change the name here, update work in progress bucket. And let's take this one and let's put this in here. And now when we run it, we see we are getting an error because that is not propagated yet, maybe. Let's see. Oh yeah, I have to publish it. And let's reload again. And now it's a success. Beautiful. So now this will be for the work in progress bucket. So whenever I drag something in the work in progress bucket, this request will happen. And this will basically take it and make the type be work in progress. So I want to add in Zano an edit record, and I want to look for my drag and drop tasks. I want to query by the ID in that task database, and I don't need to update the task, I need to update the type. The type will be to do, because this will be our endpoint for the work in progress. So let's publish this. And why, you may ask yourself, why don't you just do it like, if it was in work in progress and it gets to completed, why don't you just do it in Zano to make it completed? The issue here is, what if the user hovers over here and goes back and says, you know, I don't want to have it in there? Then it will still need to be in here, right? So this is like the thing I want to build it so that there is no confusion in between the logic here. So we got that. We should update this record now on the drag event. So update work in progress bucket. When I would call this, I would update the bucket to be to do, and this will call it whenever I drag something, for example, from here over here. So we have this request now, and I want to attach it to the drop zone. So I'm going to go to update work in progress bucket, and now I need to still add prevent default. So I want to add an on event, and I want to do drag over prevent default, and I need to do a run function to return 0, because WIS doesn't allow me to prevent default if I'm not running a run function for some reason. So let's run this, and we see it is updating. Now I have to refresh, and then it will be updated. So what we also want to do, we want to add another action that when the request finishes for update work in progress bucket, so to refresh all the tasks. So refresh tasks when work in progress bucket updates, and we want to do the same thing for the other bucket too. So let's go to event, request finishes, work in progress bucket, and we will perform the request to get tasks again, to update the tasks. So now when I add self-hosting in here, we will see that self-host Wized has been added. Now you can also do progressive updating to make it a bit more immediate, but I wouldn't fully recommend that when you do a drag and drop experience, because it will probably be a very fast endpoint anyway. But we can look into making it more snappy at the end. So we got this working. Now we want to make this work the other way around. So we want to go to Zano, and let's click on the 3 dots on top of here, and let's clone our endpoint. And let's call this update done bucket. Save. Just like that. And we have update done bucket. And what we want to do, very simple, the only thing we want to do is change the type from to do to done in our update record. So whenever we drag something over it, it will change the type to done. And then I'm just going to copy this endpoint and link it to the attribute that is related to the other bucket. So let's first create a request. I could actually even copy this request I have in Wized, because it's basically the same thing, and just give it a different name and add the different URL parameter in here, just like that. That stays the same because that just goes from our variable, and when I run it, I would, like update it, and we have self-host Wized here, for example. So I got that. So now I want to go to my drop zone, and I want to do on event, drop, perform request, update done bucket, and I want to add another on event action for drag over to prevent default. I need that because otherwise it will not snap in place. And I need to do a run function to return 0 because Wized doesn't allow us to just use their functions purely to prevent default. So now when I add iPhone in here and I reload the site, I will have the iPhone in here. But we want to reload the request the moment it was dragged in here. So I want to go back in here, and I want to create a new action like we had for, refresh tasks when work in progress bucket updates. Let's actually copy this, and let's do refresh tasks when done bucket updates, and let's remove the copy part here, just like that. And I want to look for update done finishes, and then here we go. This should work. So I will be able to add the MacBook in here, and I will be able to add the iPhone in here. And as I'm doing this, those changes are being applied on my database. This is happening on the database, and it is updating the database information, just like that. And I can do that, and I'm updating the information now while doing so on my database, which is, I think, pretty cool. Look at that. So let's actually go to the database and let's see what's going on here. Let's actually make them all to do. Okay? So let's go to the database. They're all to do, to do, to do, to do, to do. And now I'm going to move one to complete it. And let's go to the database here. And one is done. And now I'm very ambitious today. Let's make them all completed today. Boom. So now in my database, they're all marked as done. This is how you're going to make drag and drop work with your database in Wized and Webflow. Now, I said it's beginner. I think I actually may did some false claims here. It's intermediate after doing it. I had to ask ChatGPT one time, but I think it is a pretty cool thing that you can build in Wized. And you can also, manipulate this object immediately for like a more progressive approach in updating that. You don't need that. Let me do this at the end though, because I like messing around with what I just built. So let's, add like some here. As you can see, let's reload. Perfect. So I want to do progressive updating. So on drop event, on the work in progress bucket, for example, I want to run a function to basically manipulate. So let's do another on drop event under here. So when I drop this in here, I want to run a function to manipulate my existing request data immediately. Let's do this. So I have my request data in here. I'm going to write return, and let's look for, this is to do, so let's take this to do array. And I want to push an object in here. So let's do to do dot push, and let's actually define the push object above. So let's do const, and let's do const, and let's take our dragged item data in here. And actually, I don't even need to do const because I already have this bundle in here, and it doesn't matter if I change the data type because they still have, it still says task. So let's actually just push this in here. It should work. Did it work? I think it did. Let's see. Okay, so I should be able to have that pushed in here. And that should probably do it immediately. So this applies to the work in progress drop zone. And yeah, as you can see, that pushes it in immediately. So as you can see, let's add self-host Wized in here. And, it will immediately add it, but then, already rearrange it. So maybe we want to have like of a more fixed sorting happening because it will just add it at the end. So what we may want to do in our query all records in Zano is we may want to update the created at to now on both of those endpoints here. So let's go to the other one as well. And let's change the created at to now. Oh, we already have that. Let's make sure to publish it. So we get the chronological feedback back. And let's do, let's go to the other one. Oh, that was this one. And let's go to the work in progress bucket. And let's go to created at. Now, let's save this. Let's publish. Just like that. Here we go. Let's reload, and now let's drag some other ones down here. You see it's a little bit slower, and when I put them in here, it's like immediate. But they're kind of like filtered. So what we can do is, when we go to the render task in here, where we query all records, we're just going to add sorting. So I'm going to go to sorting, and let's do, this is the to-do ones, perfect. Let's stay with list, add sorting, and I want to go by a created at. Let's do ascending. Let's see if that is a result that we like. Let's see. Let's take this one in here. Perfect, that works. So as you can see, with this progressive updating, I'm getting the element immediately in here, and then it's still re-rendering the list. Check this out. Isn't that cool? So we, we immediately update that first on the front end, and then like a millisecond later on update it on the back end. So let's actually do the same thing for the other drop zone as well. Let's add another drop event here. Let's go to on event, drop, and let's go run function. And I just need to update this part that says to do to be done, so it works the other way around too, to progressively update those records. So now when I move this here, it should, be here immediately, and then reload this information here. And it works also the other way around. And as you can see, it is also doing the API calls as we talk right here. It is doing the necessary API calls all the time. Let's actually collapse on this so you can see it easier. It's doing the necessary API calls all the time, but it's first like a split second before updating it immediately on the front end, so it looks more snappy. And then like a millisecond later, it's updating it actually on the back end. So we have like a better user experience for our drag and drop. Now I know this drag and drop implementation is probably, if beginners are seeing that, and I may made a mistake saying it's for beginners, it may goes over your head a little bit. But I think it is still easy to implement, because you just need to understand the principle how drag and drop works, and then you can always work your way around implementing drag and drop. It's actually pretty simple, and I would say rather straightforward implementing drag and drop in Wized here. And as you can see, let's do everything as completed, because I'm done with the video, and it is a great way to celebrate this. And now as you can see in my database, it will all be completed, right? And when I move like, haven't bought a new MacBook yet, we have one that is still to do, the buy MacBook, which is pretty cool, because you can tweak around with, the way we built this together here to make it work with specific user accounts, to make it work with a team management platform you're building in Wized, with all kinds of exciting stuff. And I'm also going to put whatever I build in here in this live build here. I'm going to put the clonable in the video description for the Zano snippet, for the Wized project and the Webflow project, so you can just clone this and play around with it. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you so much. Just again, thank you so much for all your support, for all your wonderful comments. You don't know how much this means to me, for, just watching these videos, and I'm very grateful that you find value in them. So thank you so much for all your time, for all your wonderful comments, for all your support, all your messages on Discord, all your emails. I really appreciate that, and thank you so much, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.